Welcome back. So this is part 2. In the previous video, I introduced critical thinking and the basic steps for reading and paying attention and reading actively. In this part, I'm going to talk about those 4 elements: introduction, summary, analysis, and conclusion that will make up the written assignment. In the introduction, you're going to have the author's name, the title of the article or book, and the year in which it was published. For example, Edgar Allan Poe, A Cask of Amontillado, 1846. You'll have the author's full name. You'll put the title of the short story in quotation marks, not italics, only quotation marks, and then you'll put the year in parentheses after the title. That's typically the easiest way to do it, though you will see multiple ways of introducing those things in different examples. It's up to you which to choose. However, I'm not looking for anything innovative. I just want to know that they're there. After that, you're going to get into the author's purpose. And what I mean here by author's purpose is I just want to know basically, why did this writer write this short story? What is he trying to do? So we're looking at maybe a brief summary of the plot. Just a quick little blurb. You might also mention what context it was written in. Perhaps it's a romantic piece, a Gothic piece, a modern piece. You don't necessarily need to discuss the audience unless the audience is really relevant to why the author wrote it. Then, at the end of your introduction, you're going to have a thesis statement, your own argument. For example, we've talked hopefully before, hopefully you remember this, X because A, B, and C is a standard argumentative, analytical thesis statement formula. Because this is a very short paper, you might not have A, B, and C. You probably only have A, maybe B, if there are 2 elements that go towards proving the same thing. For example, Poe uses foreshadowing to make the reader feel a sense of fear. This lets me, your reader, know that your analytical paragraph below is going to go into foreshadowing and give examples of foreshadowing. If you find you don't find many examples and you want to use 2 things, maybe you're going to talk also about dramatic irony. So your thesis statement would have 2 points, an A and a B. Poe uses foreshadowing and dramatic irony to increase the reader's sense of fear. So in that analytical paragraph, you would have discussion and quotes for both of those items. After the introduction, you're going to have a summary. The summary should be anywhere from 1/3 to maximum 2/3 of a page. Usually you're looking for about half a page, but if you're somewhere in 1/3 to 2/3, you're good. In your summary, you're going to give the main plot of the story. You don't need to get so much into purpose unless it's really because purpose is usually a little bit argumentative. So you want to avoid arguing anything yet. You just really want to give me the plot. You're going to start at the beginning, you're going to end at the end. First, Poe takes these 2 characters into the catacombs, right? So you're going to name them. You're going to get into who the characters are, and you're going to take these characters through the plot until you get to the end. What I'm looking for in the summary is to really see that you understand what happened in the story. I'm looking to make sure you haven't missed any major plot points and that you can concisely paraphrase the main elements of a story. If you are giving plot points that are very specific to a page, I want you to make sure that you give me the page number at the end of the line. If you find you're giving page numbers at the end of every single line and they're the same page, you can remove the page numbers. If you're summarizing plot points that have happened on the same page, you can just give it at the end of that page and then move to paraphrasing the next page. Just make sure that at the end of that piece, you've indicated what page you've gotten that information from. The main point of the summary is to provide an objective overview, so make sure you're not giving your opinion about what you've read or giving any real analysis. Really focus on concise summary. In the analysis section, you want to make sure that you have given 2 or 3 quotes that concisely demonstrate the element of the text you are discussing. So, if you're talking about foreshadowing, do you have 2 or 3 quotes that accurately demonstrate foreshadowing? Have you explained those quotes? Have you pointed out that quote, what in that quote is foreshadowing? And then how does it relate to that feeling of fear that you've said in your thesis statement is highlighted by Poe's use of foreshadowing? So make sure that you're providing good quotes and that you're explaining them properly. You'll also need to make sure you have good MLA style citations. MLA style citations are just the author and the page number. In your critical response, your critical analysis, the first time you paraphrase in your summary, you can give the author's last name and the page number, and thereafter you only need the page number. In your conclusion, you're going to end by briefly stating your overall evaluation of the piece. You're also going to recap your main thesis points. But because your thesis point is really just one thing, you're not really going to be able to fill out the entire conclusion with that. So you can add some other elements of evaluation as long as it's not brand new material that might need proof. So, is it effective? Yes, Poe, it's effective. I was shivering with fear, whatever you would like to say. In the conclusion, I don't mind if you drop one I statement, but generally, because you're writing something that is a formal academic paper, you won't use I throughout the entire paper. But if you use it once in the conclusion, I don't really mark it against you. Do keep in mind that whether you liked it or not is not a standard of evaluation, but you can state why the story is effective or appealing. That's more valid. Some guidelines for responding. These might seem really easy because they're only 2 pages long, but they're really not. Often the shortest pieces of writing are the most difficult. So please don't begin this the night before it's due. Start it earlier than that. Read the piece, read it again, make sure that you've made notes. Perhaps do that one night. The next night, write your summary. The next night, write an analysis piece. Then go back and craft your introduction and your conclusion. These kinds of writing strategies will help make your writing stronger. And part of the reason I have you do a 2-page paper before you do a 5-page paper and a longer paper is because I really want you to start considering your writing strategy. And doing it with a shorter piece will help you in the long run. So make sure you give yourself time. Summarizing the author's controlling ideas concisely can sometimes be a struggle. If you find you've written a summary and it's a page and a half long, you are going to need to trim that down and make it shorter. Make sure you're choosing the standard of evaluation that works best for you. You might choose 2 smaller elements that create the same effect in a story, as I exemplified earlier with foreshadowing and dramatic irony. If you choose 2, that's great. They don't have to be the same 2. For example, there's many elements of Poe's short story that can increase a sense of fear. You might think of the setting, you might think of a particular word or image that Poe relies on and discuss that instead. Make sure that you are selecting good quotes. I do look to make sure that your quote actually does reflect foreshadowing or does reflect a particular symbol that you've decided to discuss. And if your quotes just don't do that, it's going to affect your grade. It's also going to affect your grade if you haven't explained your quotes properly. If you haven't told me why this quote demonstrates foreshadowing, you've just maybe left it there, and I have to do that work on my own, that's going to affect you as well. So make sure you're very concisely choosing your quotes and explaining them. If you struggle with developing thesis statements, please make sure you ask in class. We can review your thesis statement and focus in on ways to make it better. Often, people are very good at crafting organizing thesis statements, but then miss the argument part. So these are elements that we can work on over time. And so if you know this is already a problem, you can send me a Moodle message with your thesis statement and say, "Hey Mandy, can you check out my thesis?" And I'll do that for you. This ends my comments on how to do a critical analysis. If you have any questions for me, please shoot me a Moodle message.